Good morning, everyone. This is not Wednesday. Wednesday is what I say to my classes on Wednesday. I'm so used to saying that. It is Saturday at 10 a.m. In July 2023. I just wanted to make a note of that because this is going to be our last episode on OTJtv. And have we got any finer guests than these? No, I don't think so. I would like to introduce from the corner that starts over there with Susan Jones, the first person I talked to about this episode. Susan, good morning.
Good morning.
Next person was Suako Hara.
Hi.
And Dr. Louise Hawashi, a former guest already. Actually, yeah, Susan was on here before too. Thank you for coming. I think a lot of people want to hear your very learned, very expert opinions on the topic at hand, which is where we are, where we've been, where we might be going with machine translation and artificial intelligence. So good morning, ladies. Thank you for coming.
Morning.
Morning. Thank you.
Yeah, not at all. Susan, you were the first person that I wanted to ask about this because you started speaking and presenting on machine translation. And this is a question for everyone that's here. But, you went into this April with obviously a really good perspective on how specifically in your job, which is teaching translation to students using translation tools. How did you find this first semester? Was it not much more different than the last semester, or was it something a little bit different because of advances in MT or advances in AI? How did it go for you this semester?
It went pretty well. Just to let people know, I teach, my name is Susan Jones, and I teach at Kobe College in Nishinomiya, Japan. I teach translation, which is within the Department of English. So I teach translation in English. It's an English class, and it's several classes. It's a 3-year course. So because I'm teaching translation, of course, I've been very interested in machine translation for a long time. Machine translation has been under development since the early 70s, and this is not a new thing for us. But what is new is neural machine translation, which really hit its stride with Google Translate around 2017. And since then, I've realized that I need to teach my students how to use this technology. It has changed the landscape of translation, of the translation industry itself. So if I didn't teach my students how to use this technology, I would really be doing them a disservice. They would not be entering the translation industry with the tools they need to do their job, because these days, with the exception of literary translation, almost every field of translation will use machine translation at some stage. Not everyone, not always, but broadly speaking, it's true. So I've been teaching using machine translation. I've been teaching students how to use machine translation for 3.5 years now, I guess. And it's going really well. And I feel like it's going better and better every semester, every year. So this semester was no different. Thanks for asking, Jose. One thing, though, that I've really been concentrating on is not just using machine translation and teaching them how to use these machine translation platforms, but also teaching them about the other AI apps that are out there that can help us specifically as translators. And I'm sure this is something that Suako and Louise will also talk about. But I find myself spending more and more time introducing these apps and, what's out there, what they can use. And students really appreciate it. I don't know if it's just in my classes, in my environment. I would be curious to hear from Louise and Suako as well. But a lot of my students are super savvy about using these tools already. We like to imagine, I think that students already know how to use Google Translate and DeepL and even the AI apps like ChatGPT or Grammarly or whatever. And a lot of my students really don't.
No, they don't.
Yeah, so I find myself having to spend quite a bit of time teaching them how to use these and choosing the ones that are most helpful for them. So I'd really love to hear from Suako and Louise as well. What's your situation?
I would too as well. Before that though, so that we can a common thread in the next question, I want to ask you, because I already have you on the line. When you said about how you feel that it's important to introduce these students, because this is something that's going to be an integral part of their education, much less their lives, how did you find the administration or perhaps other members of the faculty? You already mentioned a little bit about the students themselves are like, oh, holy cow, you can actually do that. But the department itself and the administration itself, how did they come up with a policy? Did they actually even address the situation at your school?
They have been addressing it in broad terms. I am pushing for more specific language in our academic policies at our school, but they have changed the academic policy just a bit to allow the usage of these tools under the supervision and with permission of your instructor. Otherwise, please avoid them is kind of the broadly speaking, the rule that they've embraced. And that's public. They publish that on their website this semester. But a lot of my colleagues are very concerned. I've been asked to address the issue with my own department, which I have. And everybody is wondering everyone's panicking. What do we do? And how do we keep students from cheating is usually the first question that teachers have. And so a big part of my job is to reframe that and say, it's not cheating if they're using these tools responsibly and intelligently, and they're actually improving and increasing their knowledge and improving their skills by using them if they use them properly. So a big part of the hurdle right now is getting teachers to relax a little bit and embrace these tools to the extent possible within their own teaching environment. But I've been pleased so far with the reception that my school has given to allowing us to use these and allowing me to teach the use of these technologies.
Suako and Louise, you're in the middle of doing some papers on some surveys that you did. Suako, your paper, you told me a little bit about it this morning before the show began. It's based on the attitudes and the opinions that students gave back to you on questions around these tools. Could you give us a bit of a sneak peek of what you're going to be showing in that paper? What did you find students were thinking?
Actually, this is a paper that I'm developing for a presentation in Iceland. That's mid-August. Louise is going to go too, and I think she's presenting on, is it teachers' beliefs? I'm focusing on the student beliefs, but really just narrowed down to machine translation. So in the survey, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to validate a survey that can be used to understand the students' use and beliefs. And so the questions might be things such as, how do you use it? That's just the basic, how is it used? What are your beliefs on the policies? Have teachers been giving you guidelines? Have you been told to use it, or has it been banned? Those kind of questions. So even I'm still in the midst of processing this data, but even such a simple question such as, the degree of acceptability of using machine translation, or if it were to be ChatGPT, the responses are quite random. It was kind of interesting, but I also did a writing prompt. So when I checked the students' writing prompt, on the one hand in the survey, they might have said that it's that it's very acceptable to use. And whereas in the writing, what I've been seeing is that they understand, they voice out that it should be used in a sensible manner. And yet in the surveys, they're actually responding in a slightly different way. So I think I still need to adjust the questions in order to make sure that I'm actually getting the output and I'm actually able to analyze the results correctly. But they're definitely using machine translation. That's one thing. Maybe 90. Actually, I was actually surprised because one student said, how should I answer this? Because I don't use machine translation. And I was shocked because I teach in a science and engineering university, and they're very techie apt, and they're very tech savvy. They like to use new tools. And this one girl just said, oh, I just don't use it. And I was, genuinely surprised that there are still students that, haven't quite reached or, making use of these tools. So that's kind of been, I'm kind of quite interested to see how the rationalysis will go, because that way I can validate the items and make sure, because many of the studies in the past, there are many items that are kind of drawn, and it seems as if you're asking those questions, but no one's really gone through the rationalysis for any of the items as far as I've read in any of the papers. So I'm hoping that I can do a mixed methods, develop the survey that actually tells you this is what the students are saying, and also to look at the writing and the responses and interviews in order to kind of make that, triangulate the results.
Louise, you're in the midst of a paper too. Preliminarily, are you getting any kind of a gist on how your paper is, as Suwako mentioned, mostly about faculty and teachers themselves and how they feel about these tools? Are you seeing any kind of patterns in what you're getting back?
Well, last year I did a paper on machine translation. There were 153 university level educators in Japan. And what I found was that they were using machine translation themselves. And some of them were giving guidance to their students, but at a much lower level. And if they were using it themselves and with their students, they tended to be using it for writing and reading predominantly, very few using it for listening and speaking. And that they felt by and large that there should be guidelines for students to use them, but they weren't actually in general implementing that themselves. And so there's this gap between their beliefs of what should happen and what they should do. And the vast majority said that they want more training and more help, support to do this. So there's a gap there that we need to fill to help teachers. And that resulted in doing, I don't remember how many sessions, but sessions last year and this year to help teachers do that. And I remember attending Susan's session, which was really, really very useful on how we can actually guide students to learn how to use machine translation in productive ways. And so after that, when ChatGPT came out, I did another study with teachers about ChatGPT within the first 10 weeks. My co-researcher, Anthony Alm, and I wanted to find out what teachers' initial reactions were, because worldwide things were moving at a different pace. And that was partly due to the academic year. It was released at the end of November. And of course, here in Japan, we were winding down. Some universities were finishing classes in December, some in January, some in early February, whereas in other parts of the world, they were just having to deal with the middle of their courses. Some of them started in September, and this came out and they were already getting essays submitted by students that they felt were not written by the students. So there was a kind of alarmist approach at the beginning of what are we going to do about this? And so we were really curious about what was happening. And we had 367 university teachers from countries around the world. There were something more than 45 countries represented. And we asked them about different things that they were experiencing. So first of all, we wanted to know how much experience and knowledge did they have with it at that, really short 10-mark point. And what were their experiences and views of doing it for different things. And we focused on creating language learning resources, assessing students, and advising students on self-study tasks, because we thought that those things would be three teacher roles that we might have in guiding students. And it was quite interesting. We're going to present it in full in Eurocall. But, just thinking, for example, about assessment, because teachers were interested in what kind of options they would have for assessment with this. And thinking about their likelihood of using it for assessment, they were much more likely to use it for things like automated responses to multiple choice tasks and for giving feedback on written tasks, but not for grading written tasks. So, it's very nuanced. So it's like what Suwako said, we have to ask the right questions. If we just ask about assessment, for example, that's not going to tell us the whole picture. And so we need to really, when we're dealing with these kinds of technologies, we have to think in really kind of specific ways to get true perspectives on what people think about it, what students are doing with it, and so forth. And just like Susan said, my university, Gakushuin University, has had has finally made an official response to these new technologies, because until now, of course, plagiarism's covered at universities, but these different technologies have been here for a while and kind of been avoided. And when we got to April, there was nothing official. So in my department, I wrote to all of the English teachers in my department and said, we don't have an official policy at the moment, but here is some guidance. And I ran through some guidelines with them, which was basically that they are free to use any kinds of technology with the students, and students are free to use it with them too, as long as it's negotiated, and that it could be negotiated on a course level or on a task level. And that the important thing was to make sure that students knew when it was okay and when it wasn't okay. But the kind of heartwarming thing, I suppose, was that when my university did a little while later put out a public statement, I don't know if it's actually openly public, but it's university-wide. They started off by saying generative AI is expected to become an important tool for social activities and so forth in the future. So students need to understand AI and learn how to utilize it. And then they set out some of the risks, and then they gave teachers options on how they could deal with it in their courses. And they sent this out to all students in Japanese and to teachers too. And then there was a faculty development session for full-time teachers in my faculty that had 2 specialists come in and give some guidance on that in Japanese. And it was recorded for those who couldn't make it. And there is another one that's being held in September. So I can see there's an actual response to this. And I think that's because, unlike machine translation, which many teachers couldn't see it affecting them, even though it clearly did, because students were taking stuff in English and using it in Japanese in their courses. Teachers were just unaware. The Japanese teachers were unaware of it probably. But now it's a university-wide thing with ChatGPT, because every subject area can be affected really, really clearly. So people are responding.
I want to ask Louise the same question I asked Susan before. On an individual level, your peers immediately around you, how did you feel that people got along with the situation for this first semester? Your university gave out guidance, which is actually something that not every university did. But how do you feel it went with first with you? Did you find that there were any hiccups? Did you find that a lot of students seem to be writing so much better this semester, or anything like that?
No, I didn't. And I'm in a kind of unique situation now. I mean, I taught English as a subject itself, like a skill-based subject for many years, but starting from last year, I've moved into language education and second language acquisition courses and seminar guidance for students who are doing research in these areas. So my take on the use of machine translation is a little different now. And so, for example, in my lecture course, because it's a course that's done as an English as a medium of instruction course, when they do their Moodle tasks, I put a set of guidelines on my Moodle about what they can do for the tasks. And I told them that it's okay to use machine translation. And I gave them some options of how to use it if they actually want to improve, or how to use it if they just want to get their ideas to me in English and make sure they self-edit at the end. But I also mentioned ChatGPT, and I said, look, this kind of task is for this purpose, and this is why it's not appropriate for this task. And so I needed to address it with students at that point. But later in the course, when we did do a section on the use of technology in second language acquisition, one of the Moodle tasks was about their use of machine translation and ChatGPT. And the responses I got were really interesting, because it let me see their actual self-study tasks, what they're doing that, they're not necessarily reporting to teachers. And just as a kind of recall, one of them wrote about how they prepare for the TOEIC test by prompting ChatGPT to give them vocabulary exercises that are in that TOEIC test style, with TOEIC at a certain range level. And others who are using it as chat partners. Somebody in my self-directed learning course wanted to improve their speaking, and they added a Google Chrome add-on so that they could have text to speech and speech to text, after I showed them how to do this in the self-directed learning course, and did that as part of a 4-week self-learning project to improve their speaking skills. And so students are starting to use it in kind of innovative ways, but they still need guidance on this. I mean, in the self-directed learning course, I have the option to do that. And so we brainstorm ways that we can use it, and students try out different things. But I don't know how much scope there is in a lot of courses to really spend time on it. And it's something that if teachers are really busy with other things, they won't even know what students are doing.
Yeah. I want to ask Suako the similar question along those lines. However, first of all, thank you, Adam, for sending up Teresa's comment in the Facebook live stream. And for those of you who are watching us on the Facebook live stream, good morning. Thank you for coming. If you type what you want to ask of our illustrious guests there, I will try to send it up here. Adam kind of beat me to the punch. But if there's anyone here who wants to do that in the Zoom room, please write it in the chat, and I'll do the same thing and get that question up to everyone. And I will get to Teresa's question in just a moment. But to Suako, in your case, what Louise was talking about, which is actually at least getting the students to recognize how they can use it and to ask them how they're using it. Did you have any plan coming into this semester of like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do to address it specifically, and this is what I'm going to tell them. Here are the no-nos and stuff.
So I've taken on 3 writing courses for first years. And they've gone through the Jugen process where they're not using computers in order to write. They had to write one-sided argument kind of essay. So they kind of like they've come into the university with that skill or training for that skill. That was part of the entrance exam. And in the classroom, I do see that the students are using ChatGPT and also machine translation. I see that from the survey results as well. I see a slight difference in the level of writing. And when I look at the writing, I know that they've used certain tools. And I'll ask them, is this your own writing? And they're actually very honest. And they say, oh, I use ChatGPT. So then I thought, okay, there's a certain level of take-home assignments, and in class, if they're on the computer, they have access to all these tools. So I want to encourage them to use these tools, but of course to use it sensibly, so that there's some kind of learning process involved. So there's some writing that I do in class without any computers. It's the quick writes, and I've compared those quick writes. They're mainly TOEFL writing prompts. So similar, do you have an opinion on this particular topic? And they'll write for about 10 minutes. And I've been keeping track of the amount of writing and the quality of the writing that they've been doing. Thankfully, their quality of writing has actually been very, very similar to 2018 and before that. So I've been looking at the numbers and the scores and the writing style, and they kind of plateau because there's a maximum they can write. Maybe about 120 was the average. The maximum was 140 or 50 words in 10 minutes that they were able to write on average. But yeah, so with the tools are accessible. Our university has a policy related to ChatGPT. They announced it in around May, I think. And I've seen lots of other ChatGPT related policies. They tend not to ban, but really just to guide the students that they should use it sensibly, that it should be a learning process, that it shouldn't be a copy, paste and submit.
Right.
So that seems to be one of the common things that I'm seeing with the policies. And I've also expressed that to the students. And because I have 90 writing students, I can't check every single one to see. I do, of course, look through, but there's only a certain level. So of checking that I can do. So I asked the students to do a self-check for themselves. I asked them to use Q-Text for plagiarism. I asked them to use Writer. That's an AI detection tool. I asked them to do it, and they can judge, they can decide whether or not the value represents, that they've just copied and pasted and submitted. And I asked them, well, the challenge is now you've got these tools, you want to make use of it, but you also want to be able to write, to be able to output writing without these tools. So we're going to try and figure out a way where we can balance that work and kind of build on both skills. So, I ask them, I give them the list of academic vocabulary as well. The vocabulary is important. You also need to construct sentences. You should make use of these tools. And so I'm trying to figure out the best way to kind of get that balance within the time frame that we have in order to, you know, the 15 weeks course, and there's only so much time and you know, of balance that we can kind of bring into the classroom. So I show them all the tools, show them that there's two sides. At some point, the carpet's going to, you know, the comfortable cushion's going to be taken away from them, and can they still write? So I ask them, can you do that? And then, you know, please go ahead and use the tools in a beneficial way, in a learning, in a way that will help with, you know, acquisition of the language. So
Louise or Susan. Susan, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, can I ask, both of you actually just mentioned specifically telling students, you know, when it's okay to use these tools, giving them explicit permission to use them. I think that's such an important point. Yeah. A lot of teachers tend to bury their head in the sand and just say, don't use them, and then try to ignore what's going on. Instead of that, I think it's very, very important to let students know when it's okay to use them and when you don't want them to use these tools. Exactly. I actually have a pledge that my students have to sign at the beginning of every semester. And so we have a conversation at the beginning of every semester about, you know, what are the parameters here? This is not a blanket, okay, you can use these anytime you want. This is simply saying, sometimes we're going to use them and it's okay to use them then. But when I don't give you specific instruction to use machine translation or AI, please don't, because I want to see your work. I want to see human translation sometimes instead of machine translation, for example. But what I found was it didn't really resonate with students until they understood the why behind this. So why is it not okay to use to just copy and paste ChatGPT output? Why is it not okay to just copy and paste DeepL machine translation? And it wasn't until we spent a couple of weeks looking at the specific types of errors, the specific pitfalls of using these tools, that they really got it. And then they could really understand why I didn't want them to use it for certain tasks or for certain assignments. I'm wondering, I have a question for both Suako and Louise. How much time do you spend actually teaching students the why behind our requests for usage or non-usage? How much do your students understand, you know, what the real pitfalls are behind the technologies?
Louise, why don't you go ahead?
It depends on the class I'm teaching, because some of them, like that lecture course, is a content class. We don't have much time to focus on that, but it's covered. I do briefly cover it in the very first class of the year. And when we get back to the technology class, they are asked to write about the advantages and disadvantages of using these technologies. But in the self-directed learning class, so I'm lucky enough to teach all students who come into my department. So I have half of them in the first semester in 2 classes and half in the second. So that means that I get to kind of do this training with all of the students who come up through the system, which is great. And in that course, we have time to explore the tools more. And I like them to have opportunities to discuss it themselves with some question prompts so that they can think about, you know, different, firstly, how have they used it? How are some ways that they think are okay to use it? What would be a way that you would think was not okay? Why wouldn't that be okay? Why wouldn't it be okay for your teachers for some classes? Why wouldn't it be okay for your own development? And so they have discussions about these types of things in their first year of uni. And then I show them some different ways to use it for writing. For example, those of you who went to my workshop in GELT a while back, I get them to write for 5 minutes in English. And then after they finish their writing without stopping, it's kind of like Suako's quick write, but half as long. But they can get those kind of, maybe the class level of students who are coming in are a bit different. So they can get to those kinds of levels kind of quite quickly in 5 minutes. And so they are producing 5 minutes of unedited text with typos, with grammar mistakes. And then they are going through the process of self-editing. And then they're putting it into machine translation and they're reading the output and looking for any immediate errors that came from their input. And then they are checking to see if, like on DeepL, if there are any synonyms that would be better to use because they have, overused a word repeatedly, etc. And then they back translate and look again, and they go through this whole process, and then they go back to their original and they make the changes themselves to that edited, the self-edited version. So they've got their original written version here, they copy it below so that they can see the difference at the end. And they've self-edited first, then they've used machine translation, come up with their best version, and then they transfer manually those changes to their document. And then they can compare the top and bottom one. And the extra step, if they want to, is they can look at the kinds of things that they changed. I always highlight them. It's something I've been doing for my own language writing development. And so we look at that process, and then we're like, okay, well, what kind of thing did this help you with? What kind of thing did this highlight for you? How could this be beneficial for you? But we also use machine translation for speaking tasks. Maybe this is a bit rarer, but we take a typical, I don't know, at the beginning of the class, a warm-up topic, like, what did you do on the weekend, for example. We take one of those warmers, and the students think about it for a minute and try to come up with some ideas about it. And then in one of the stages that we do this, they record themselves talking about it, and then they listen to themselves, they find what they couldn't say. And then they have time to check machine translation to find out how to say those expressions. And it's better than a dictionary for this generally, because they're looking for expressions and not just singular words often. So they find those expressions, they write them down, and then they tell their partner. And so I taught them that as a process of something they could do outside of class so that they could improve their speaking, because it's something I do all the time when I use HelloTalk. When I want to communicate in different languages that I'm talking to people in, sometimes I will just check what I need to say with machine translation first, and then I'll leave the voice message. Or I'll check machine translation while I'm having a call with somebody, and I will integrate that into the conversation. And through repetition, my speaking skills are improving. So I teach those kinds of techniques to students so that they can do it themselves. And some of them told me they started doing that as part of their self-study project. So doing self-talk, checking some things, and then doing it again. Some of them while they brush their teeth, some of them while they dry their hair. So wow. There are now students in Tokyo. There are students in Tokyo who are like drying their hair, talking to themselves.
It's like my walking videos. Learn to walk while you actually chew gum and speak English all at the same time. Yeah. I have a million questions that are running through my head that I want to ask, but I don't want to take up all the time because there are also questions coming out of the live stream and in the chat. First, a comment from C.A. Eddington. She says, at some point while Louise was mentioning how she addresses this in the classroom, C.A. Eddington says, a great point. Rather than just telling students what they can or can't do, have them think about and discuss the whens and whys of machine translation. Suago, I want you to address that if you want as well, to like, what do you do in class to actually take care or frame the issue for the students? But we had a question specifically for you from Chiyuki. Before that, though, I don't want to ignore what Teresa wrote. Teresa wrote a little bit, maybe about 10 minutes ago. Do you find students who are using the tools creates an advantage over other students' speed, output, level of submission? Keep that in mind. But there was a specific question for you, Suako, from Chiyuki Yanase. Suako, have you already come up with sensible ways in class? This issue seems very similar to the discussion about native language usage in communicative language classes. The controversy about whether or not people like me should be teaching in Japanese if they can teach in Japanese, or whether it's immediately expected that a person like you or Chiyuki should, because you're Japanese teachers, you should be teaching in Japanese. Do you feel that is something that you can draw a parallel with? I think is what the question is trying to ask.
I'm trying to re-understand the question. So have I come up with a sensible way in class of how to use machine translation in the classroom? Is that what it's
basically? Yeah. So that was very similar to what the question we were previously talking about. And she wanted to, Chiyuki, I think, wanted to create a parallel about expectations for us. So what we're supposed to be doing in communicative language classes. But if you don't see a parallel, you don't see a parallel. I would normally ask her to turn on her camera, but I think she's at the hairdressers right now. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. She's really at the hairdressers. So in the classroom, well, because I'm teaching predominantly a writing class this semester, it's very relevant. And it was interesting because Susan had, when we did a talk together back in March, she had mentioned that it's really important to tell the students when to use it and when not to use it. But it's important to keep reminding them when to. And so when I had asked one of the students about whether their opinions on how much reminding the teacher has done in terms of, you know, when is it acceptable to use machine translation, one of the students' response was, and in a way it was quite shocking, was, I will use machine translation and ChatGPT at any point in time unless my teacher tells me not to use it. But basically 99% of the times when the teacher is not saying, for this task, do not use these tools, the student's mindset is it's okay to use these tools. And so I think there needs to be a way for us to guide and help the students, as you know, as Susan had mentioned, the whys of why it's important in this particular task, why it's important not to use that tool, because we're trying to build some writing skills, or, you know, those things need to be explained to them at that point in time. I thought that was a very, very key point. So in my class, I do remind the students, not too often, but, you know, when we start a process, if it's the quick writes, basically I tell them, this is a quick write. You don't need to have your computers on. It's free writing. Just write as much as you can. The purpose of the writing task, to get your ideas down on paper. And so again, I'm trying to find ways to balance the no tool writing and with the tool writing, and also showing them the different things that can be done in order to improve it. And there was also the post-edit, pre-edit, post-edit that Susan had mentioned about before as well. So trying to teach them those skills at that point, and what is beneficial about that in terms of you're constructing your own ideas, then you write it. Now, if you want to use machine translation, you need to make sure that the machine understands what you're saying. You translate it, and now you're going to back translate. You're back translating because you're checking to see. So all these steps, I do guide them to a certain level, but there's only so much time I can really spend writing.
Exactly.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Susan.
Susan, go ahead and respond. I want to ask a question.
Your students' response about, I'm going to use these tools unless I'm specifically told not to use them, really resonated with me, because I'm teaching in a classroom that's a computer classroom. It's an original call classroom. So I can monitor all of my students' work, what they're doing. And what I've noticed over the past couple of years is that, you know, I'm teaching in English. It's an EMI class. I'm teaching in English. So part of the benefit of taking the class is not just learning translation, but also gaining English skills, right? Gaining language competency. Because I'm teaching in English, and I have designed my class materials to be on a level that's going to challenge them a bit. You know, I've really curated my materials so that it is meaningful to them, and it does provide an opportunity to learn English. But what I've noticed by monitoring my students is that they're just automatically using machine translation to translate, not just to do their homework. I mean, leaving homework and assignments aside for a moment, they're using it for everything. They're using it to translate my comments on their translation work. They're using it to translate the instructions. They're using it to translate lecture notes. They're using it to translate PowerPoint slides. They're using it for everything. And so that benefit of challenging themselves to learn new material in English, in a foreign language, what is their L2, is disappearing. And that's a kind of new reality that we all need to understand, because for them, machine translation is just a part of life now. It's not, they're not conscious, it's not a conscious decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Like spell check.
Right? Right? Even for us, I mean, even for me, when I get my stack of documents that I need to read for a faculty meeting, am I going to sit down and spend 3 hours reading them in Japanese? No, I'm going to use machine translation and get the gist of what they mean. So we need to sort of have a shift there as well. It's not just about using it for this assignment or using it responsibly, but just understanding that the whole dynamic of the class is is now changing. At least it is for me. And I don't know if you guys are seeing that as well. But Suako's students' comment really resonated with me just now.
And so because my students are at a science and engineering university, and the aims for them is to be able to disseminate the research that they do effectively. And so even with with presentations and writing up a script, they will use Google Translate, a DeepL or Google Translate, or they'll use ChatGPT in order to generate the script, because their ultimate aim is not about being able to get that skill to use English fluently at that point in time. It's really, I want to get my research heard by the people at the other end. And so, we want to help them to be able to reach that ultimate goal.
Right.
But of course, it's beneficial if they can speak English.
Right.
But they really need to talk about their research first. So
exactly.
Louise, you wanted to respond?
Well, look, it begs the question, what do we really need to prepare them for? And it ties in with something Adam wrote in the chat about.
I wanted to get to that.
What should we be assessing in writing courses? And what should I tie that into with what should we be doing with our students to prepare them for the real world? And, these tools are available now. And when I did the follow-up interviews with that study on machine translation and talked to teachers about their own use of machine translation, many of them, like Susan just explained now, said that they use machine translation to lighten their workload, to get through things that they receive as emails, for example, to get through them quickly. And think about, any time when you've needed perhaps to have a bilingual abstract for an article. And I think it's very, very common that people use machine translation professionally to at least start a draft. So it's really unrealistic for us to be expecting our students to write things from scratch and to do them using really old methods like, only relying on a dictionary and spell check. When we've got things like Grammarly available that are inbuilt into ChatGPT is going to be inbuilt into Word, isn't it? Has it started?
Parts of it are, to a certain degree.
Right.
But it will eventually.
Exactly. And inbuilt into email. Isn't Bard going to be put into Gmail at some point? I don't know if I'm reading that, but I could have dreamt that. But I would
be shocked if it wasn't.
I will bet it happens, So these things are going to become just this lens through which we see the world. And we're at the cusp of change. And so we really need to reevaluate what we're doing in our courses, what we want to do, where we want to take our students, and what we want to assess. Are we going to want to keep assessing things that don't have real world meaning? Or are we going to want to help students in other ways and not make those the actual assessment tasks? I mean, of course, I want to help my students to improve their English skills and their language skills, especially in the self-directed learning course, because they're focusing on English and their other second foreign languages. In that course, they're focusing on how to build skills themselves with their own learner autonomy and their own, guidance from teachers and classmates. They're learning how to push forward themselves with language development. But, in that course, I'm not giving them any language tests, any language proficiency tests. What I'm checking is, have they learned how to make plans that they can actually carry out? Have they matched their long-term and short-term goals with tasks that actually work towards them? And have they found ways to effectively evaluate their shortcomings and overcome them? Those are the kinds of real-world skills I think they need through that course. And then they will go on their own little journey with languages. I'm 46 and my journey with French that started at 13 still going. And the last thing I need is a language proficiency test on it. I need someone to talk with or a book to read. You know what I mean? Like real world stuff. So I sometimes wonder what we are actually evaluating in courses. That
would be my next point exactly. When I feel that there's a certain fear among other teachers, for example, at one of the universities I teach at, a lot of because it's the Joho Shori of this engineering university, and they teach a lot of coding. And it is actually very easy to get ChatGPT to solve a coding puzzle for you. And they just put down a blanket ban. You will not use ChatGPT at any point during this class. Well, that's a little extreme, and you know, sarcasm quotes in there too. But is the incongruence that we feel, ladies, I don't know how you think about this, but is the incongruence that we feel with ChatGPT in our classrooms and how our students use it, partly because the way that we assess, or the way that assessment has always been designed, is something that really we can't depend on anymore. While you think about that, I got a ton of remarks here that I would just want to go through really quickly, so I can just note that people did send them to us very graciously. So after Suwako, as Louise mentioned, Adam asked a very similar question: what should we be assessing in writing courses? Helen Hanae, I think she wrote this quite a bit before we started talking about what we do in our classrooms, but she says, I don't have much time to do this in my general courses. What has been an effective and time-efficient way to get students up to speed? And we mentioned that a little bit. There are a couple of other, there's one from Alex Macaulay in the live stream. And he says, and I'm just reading this as we go, we are suffering from historical neglect. For whatever reason, many universities in Japan have not put in place a clear, transparent, easily accessible policy on plagiarism. As the speakers point out, the landscape is now so much more complex with all these tools. And universities need to finally catch up. The speakers give excellent commentary here, but I think teachers want the university to teach students about these issues in first year as part of broader instruction on academic socialization. I do not want to spend 3 to 4 sessions in each of my courses dealing with these issues. Is the onus then on the university as opposed to the teachers themselves, figuring out for themselves how they want their students to face this? Because there's so much change in the air. Probably what we're talking about right now, when we get to October, is going to be so much more different. I mean, if you get to the point where your email is pointing out your mistakes to you as you write it, and maybe you're typing so fast you don't even notice that your email software is changing your writing for you. What does that mean when we're still using assessment methods and pedagogical standards that stem all the way back, some of it, to the 1930s, to the 1940s? That's a really broad question.
Well, I think that last question is really important, because where does the responsibility lie? And documents like the one that my uni finally put out, you know, they're shared with students, but how much discussion happens with those documents? How much discussion happens about plagiarism policies? In my courses, yes, we did that, but I don't teach half of the students until next semester. And so that means if no other teacher picked up that document in their, for example, their writing courses and talked about it with their students, then it wasn't directly discussed. It was something that was just in a long list of messages that go out to students. And so it's one thing to have a policy. It's another thing to have students read it, understand it, engage with it, think about the reasons for it, and move forward with that. So it's very challenging. And I think, as for example, when I was doing my master's course or PhD course, when we had the main subjects, that a lot of things were not covered, but we could take some required and some optional workshops. And so maybe the responsibility is on the university for providing those kinds of, you know, workshops that let students know, and it's conducted in their own language, and it's a compulsory thing that needs to be done at a certain period. Maybe it'd be an interactive one. Maybe it would be something that they watch as a video. We as full-time staff at my university, we have to go through these videos about cyber crime, I'm sure you've done them too, like phishing and that kind of thing, so that we can really take care not to give out university information through email and so forth accidentally. And we also have to do stuff for ethics, for research. And there's short series of videos with tasks that you have to do, and they get logged by it's tracked by my ID. So there's a record kept of me having done it. Maybe we need something really similar for students that targets plagiarism.
I think students do that as well in our university. They have to go through the same process.
Okay.
But I think when the university has a policy and the department has a policy and things that is told to the students directly, what the teachers say in the classroom surely has to resonate much more closely to the students. So
well, for sure.
Although the university might have a policy and the responsibility lies in the for the university or the department, I think the request, at least speaking from the perspective of the university, is that they would like the teachers to then pass on those policies in the classroom, because I think they understand that that's where the students are listening, the most, and because it kind of affects their grades, so they're going to listen to the teacher a bit more than maybe the university related to
but the training, perhaps the training on how to actually do it, like how to effectively do it, it wouldn't hurt to have something definitely that shows, examples of effective use, examples of misuse,
abuse.
Susan, like sorry, go ahead.
Susan. Yeah, and how many, I think somebody pointed out, maybe in the chat, I don't remember, I don't have time, the person said, I think it was in our chat, I don't have time to spend 2 or 3 class sessions, teaching about this. It was a Helen, thank you, Helen. That is such a good point. I mean, Suako and Louise and I we've all managed to, sort of form our courses around these ideas and incorporate these tools as we're going along. But not every class has that luxury, obviously. But as Louise said, it is, and Suako said, getting that information from us in the classroom is probably having the most impact. So we do have some responsibility there. And I do feel like students don't have a good grasp of the basic question, what is plagiarism? And what is copyright? My students still think that any image they find online is free. If they can download it, they can use it. That's kind of their idea. They're shocked to find out that they can't just use these images freely, and that it's actually a crime, and plagiarism is actually a crime. Of course, it says that in the school policy, you can't plagiarize, this is a crime. But they don't get it until you actually, as Louise said, show them specific examples. So having that kind of either, whether it's a freshman, a first-year student course that teaches them about these issues, or whether it's an online course with examples and training before they even start the first semester at school, I think that is really, really helpful. I can say too that I know my own son, who started college in the States last year, had to do exactly that kind of thing that Louise mentioned, an online course with quizzes that was tracked to him, that he had to have completed and had to have passed. You could take the quizzes as many times as you needed to. You had to have passed it in order to register for classes.
Well,
so it was.
I should check, because I started teaching in this department last year, full-time in this department. So I should actually check. Maybe they do have something that I don't know about. I'm going to ask at the student office, and I would like to see a copy of it, actually. So this is good. It's good that this discussion happened, because this is a kind of thing that makes us aware of what may be available, or what questions to ask our students. If we don't know about things that are provided to students, makes a big difference, right? I mean, me knowing that students received that message about generative AI allowed me to have a discussion with students about it. And so if they actually do have that kind of workshop or tutorial, then I want to know about that too. But again, this is something that's not directly told to the teacher. So there needs to be more communication between admin and students and teachers as a, working
in my case, I'm dean of freshman students for my department, so I know for sure that they are not getting that information.
Well, get the job done. Come on.
So at the same time, I don't have time to develop that course on my own and implement it. I mean, that's just
exactly.
It needs to be done, but can I take it on? No, I absolutely have my plate full. I can't do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was what Alec was saying. That was what Helen was saying. I don't know if I may. And it's hardly. I don't want to get anyone the idea that I've found a solution. But I thought, how do I do that? How do I address these issues in a class where I'm teaching writing? Not only writing, but it's completely online. Like, it's all synchronous. It's all on Zoom, so it's really hard. I find. I found that if you are willing to sort of make a big jump and change a lot within the class, so that then what you're doing in the class requires that you explain these tools, because they're going to be using the tools in the class. Basically what Susan was doing with machine translation, as part of things, you're killing two birds with one stone. You're introducing the material, the tools, you're teaching your materials. And as you're introducing the tools, then you're also introducing methods to think about it in terms of ethics, in terms of critical thinking, in terms of its weaknesses and advantages. So the more you bring the tools in, the more naturally it becomes part of the semester's work, as opposed to thinking, I need 3 or 4 classes just to talk about this stuff, much less get back to working with the textbook. I think you start sort of putting some stuff aside that you don't need to do. And what you do or don't need to do is something that you have to decide as a teacher. Now, first, I want to ask our guests, we're coming up on the hour, and I would really love it if we could continue this conversation, because we haven't really allowed anybody in the room. They can.
Sorry.
But it's a fascinating topic, and a lot of people will have things to say. So if you guys don't mind, if you could stay for a little bit longer, I would like to invite everyone in the Zoom room to come in with their cameras. Keep your microphones muted until we sort of prompt you to do it. But then that way we can have a bit more of a sort of a town hall kind of feeling, and start bringing in your questions, not just in the chat, but if you raise your hand using the reactions button, then I'll be able to know who's coming up with things like this. Just to sort of get that in mind, how do you think, and anyone can answer this question, how do you think your teaching, your assessment, your pedagogy, even your use of textbooks? I mean, if we're going to be doing this with machine translation, it's obviously much easier to deal with things completely digitally. How do you think you're going to be you will be forced to change within the next 6 months or within the next year, which I'm sure is going to be hard to predict, because my God, like what actually else will be coming down the pipeline in the next 6 months? Or what do you think you want to change, even at least in October? Is there anything that you guys have been thinking about that, Susan?
One thing that I'm changing right now as I write my final exams for this semester is my final exam itself is changing from what it used to be. It used to be, translate this passage. I teach translation. So I would have some multiple choice questions, some general information questions they had to answer, but it was all translation. It was focused on them doing a translation. That has become less important to me. I am asking them to do short answer essay type questions now, high order thinking questions, causing them, enticing them to think about these issues more deeply as the test. That is the test. And I usually let them know that it's going to be these kinds of questions so they can start thinking about it before test day. So I guess it's a kind of open book test in that sense. But yeah, my method of evaluation is definitely changing. One of the comments we got earlier too was in the chat was, how do you assess, when you have some students using these tools and others who don't, how are you assessing them? We can tell, obviously, all of us can tell in a heartbeat whether a student, if this is 100% student human writing, or if they've had some help, or if they've used some tools. So I think that if they're using tools, it's perfectly okay to raise our standards and to say, okay, your machine translation or your ChatGPT has brought you up to this level. How do you make it yours? How do you change it? How do you rewrite it? How do you customize it to bring it up to another level? And it's to that extent, how well can they post edit? How well can they adapt? I've changed what I'm looking at. I've changed what I'm assessing in that case. So yes, definitely.
So, Louise, have you thinking about your assessment or thinking about your classroom procedure itself? Anything else that you can think that has changed or will change?
I mean, classroom procedure, because I do try to integrate training or discussions about these tools. And I teach students who are going to write their graduation thesis in English. And in my department, there are only 2 teachers no, sorry, I think there are 3 who do that, and the others are written in Japanese. So, the goal is not to actually take an English test. This is for them to express their ideas about educational research. And so I'm looking too with my students at how they can use these kinds of technologies to help them to complete that task, because I don't expect them to write this, 5,000 word document solely using their own English skills. They can, one of my students who's doing her master's under me now, last year when she was doing her graduation thesis for her undergraduate degree, she became really interested in machine translation, how it might actually help her, but not because she wanted to get out of writing the assignment. In fact, she's done a lot of work to improve her English. She did it with the specific goal of learning effective strategies that might help her to be able to write by herself and improve her work. So the thing is, though, with time, we've got so much to cover in the course that it's really hard to find time for that kind of stuff. So I would really like to have more opportunities to show students how to use these things effectively in courses where they really need to produce something. Like Suko said with her students, they just want to get their research out there, right? To have time for that. But there's so many other aspects of things that you need to do in the course, like teaching them about research ethics, teaching them how to make a survey, teaching them how to make a consent form for the interviews, teaching them all of these different kinds of things. And of course, the lectures and the assignments that are connected to second language acquisition itself, so they can develop interest areas that they want to research. So they need that background information too. So that's a real challenge. And I would say that I'm not really doing it as effectively as I would like to yet. It's something that I need to find better balance with. One way I do address this with students, and maybe something other teachers can do too, is setting some of their homework tasks as being thought pieces on this. So that assignment in my lecture course where they do write about their own use of machine translation and ChatGPT and look at the pros and cons, that's a chance for them to do that, for me to get student views on it. And if it was a writing course, doing that as one of the free write tasks, maybe one week you write about the advantages of it, then the next week you write about the disadvantages of it, or you make it one of the assignments, you make it connected to an assignment, because we don't have space for this because we're focusing on so many other things. But if we have opportunities to make some small assignments related to these topics themselves, then I think it's possible. I used to teach a discussion course, and it would have been really easy to put this topic in as a discussion topic one week, for example. And I taught an academic presentation course. Well, it could be easy enough to suggest this as one of the topics, because they talk about some controversial things. Well, the use of machine translation and AI in different facets of society is obviously really controversial. I don't know if you've all seen this or not, but at the moment, they're trying to replace actors with AI.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they want to scan background actors and then be able to use their image, their likeness in anything in the future. And so it's not just words that are up for grabs these days. It's our voice, it's our image, it's everything. So it's something that we're going to have to focus on more and more in society.
I have a couple anecdotes about that. That thing that you were just talking about, how actors are concerned about this, that's actually part of this writer's strike about AI and stuff. But it was Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson noticed in his Disney contract that there was a clause in the contract that says, we by signing this contract, you are allowing us to use your image in perpetuity.
Yes.
In perpetuity, in an age of AI, means that they can take his face when he's dead and put him on an AI body and do that. And he just said, no, just going to strike that out, going to just Sharpie that whole paragraph. And he doesn't sign his contracts without that struck out. And then yesterday I was watching a YouTube ad. And it was about hair loss, and it's hilarious that YouTube now gives me ads about hair loss. But it was about hair loss, and they obviously had taken the guy who was doing the before after of this hair loss commercial and put his head in a deep fake, because he was speaking almost fluent English. And I'm thinking, okay, what are the chances that I'm going to suspect that that's a deep fake motion? Because you can sense a deep fake motion on a face. and the fact that this guy's suddenly speaking English to me as a potential client to this hair loss product. So you've already got it. It's already happening. These things are already happening right in front of us. I want to encourage everyone. I don't know why Linda suddenly became shy and turned off her camera. Maybe she had to go cook in the kitchen or something. Oh, there she is. But if others would like to do the same, please come in and ask us your questions. Suako, I don't know if we had a chance to hear what you did about changing what you're doing in class.
So what I'm changing, or what I might, because this semester has been interesting in terms of, especially with ChatGPT coming in, I can see a great difference from the writing from 2018. So this gap has also been very interesting for me, because I didn't merge into this writing class over the years and seeing how the writing has changed. I've kind of time slipped from 2018, where I saw the writing at that time. And then all of a sudden, the writing from ChatGPT looks very, very different. So what I'm going to do is definitely take these student samples of the before and after, and I'll, demonstrate to them how these changes can be made. In terms of evaluation, I have always been looking at what students do in the classroom without the support, and also out of classroom, or in the classroom, but with the support of different tools. We also have students do multiple drafts. I think that's quite common with evaluations for writing. And we might see that some students in the first draft do, write an amazing piece of writing because they're using ChatGPT at the very start. But I can see through that development whether or not they're really understanding the different elements of the writing process, different functions, different genre. We have to teach summaries and one-sided arguments. So within those summaries and one-sided argument, I will definitely be checking to see that they understand why these parts are there and what the purpose is of all these elements and why it's in that order. And those kind of quizzes I'll probably develop. I already have a checklist that they can look through to understand. So I look at their writing, look at the checklist. Do they have these parts? Yes or no? And so I can see, if they tick yes for one, but it's not reflected in the writing, it's obviously not something that they have really understood the concept of. So it's going to be very interesting looking back at this semester's writing with the students using ChatGPT, and especially because I have a lot of the data, I can trace back and see how they responded in the questionnaires as well. So lots of work this summer.
Oh yeah.
Very exciting though. Exciting times.
That's a good word to use. Louise, you very graciously put in a bit of an advertisement for the event that's going on tonight, and we're past the top of the hour. A few people have to go on to other appointments, and I wanted to give you a chance to just very quickly sort of say that out here in the room too. What's going on tonight?
So I'm the chair of the AI SIG for Eurocall, and we're organizing our first event, and I'll just screen share if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so this is what we're planning to do. Firstly, we are going to join if we're not members. Anybody can join, and I've put the link in the chat, so you can just access directly. So we have two speakers, and our first speaker is going to be looking at empowering L2 writers, looking at dynamic AI writer collaboration. Our second speaker is going to be showing us how to make artwork through AI. And then we have that MyShare session. And so what we wanted is for this to be quite interactive. I've put these posters also in the chat for you to take a look at, but this is the kind of format that we're going to have. We're going to start with a just brief introduction and chat for 15 minutes at 6:30. Then we'll have the session on AI writing. And then from 7:15 to 7:45, it's a MyShare. So we'd love it if people could come in and participate and share what they've been doing. Then we'll have the session on generating images. And then we'll end with a short discussion at the end. So it's a 2-hour event in total. Feel free to share those, the link, the Zoom link and the passcode with whoever you like. Everybody's welcome to come.
Great. Did you put that on OTJ, by the way?
Oh, I will. Okay, I'll do that at the end. I'll add it to OTJ.
Sure. And
just a reminder for the people who are in the room now, you can save the chat. Just a reminder, a lot of us haven't used Zoom for a while. So if you go to the chat and you push the the 3-dot button at the bottom of the chat. You can save the chat to your computer after the session is finished. It'll automatically download to your computer, and you'll have all your links and everything. Yeah.
If
yeah.
you're on your iPhone, you don't have that option. I found out last night.
Okay, drop me a line. Drop me a line via Messenger, or I will also, as Jose said, I will pop it in the OTJ. Like, you mean on the session itself, Jose? On the link for the session?
No, Adam just said he added the link to the live stream chat, so it's already up there.
Okay, perfect. Cheers, Adam. Thanks, mate.
OTJ.
I can't see the live screen. I can't see that live stream chat.
I can provide it for you in just a second. Linda, did you want to make a comment? Your microphone's open.
No.
Oh, okay.
Earlier I had a comment about ChatGPT, and if students use that, is it considered plagiarism?
I would consider it plagiarism if they said, "Hi, Mr. Cruz, here's my essay."
Okay, if they use it as a starting point and then they edit it, so it's somebody on OTJ or some other Reddit line I was following asked if a college professor uses ChatGPT to do the student referrals or notes, minutes they have to do, is that okay? All the scuttlebutt that you have to write all the time for reports and things.
I think that opens up a whole can of worms. Especially with certain teachers. I find that the teachers who are most likely to say, "You will not use ChatGPT in my classroom," are the ones who are using it all the time to actually read email. So there's that. However, when it comes to the students, I just kind of think of it this way. I just replace the word ChatGPT with his friend or her friend. Mm-hmm. Her friend gave them a starting point, did the research for them, gave them a whole bunch of point forms, and they edited it a bit. Does that count as plagiarism to me? His friend, her friend actually wrote 3 or 4 of the paragraphs, but they passed that off to me as entirely their work. How does that look? So I just kind of think of it that way, and it helps sort of enlighten and helps me judge where the dividing line will be. But I just think of it as just
there's another issue that I hadn't even thought about with ChatGPT. I had to write a recommendation for one of my colleagues for promotion, and I spent a week writing this 2-page letter, and that was fine, and they accepted it, and she was in the right track, but they needed more. And they said I could resubmit the same thing. I didn't have to write more, but I just put her qualifications, the things that she's done, into ChatGPT and got a nice little new summary. But something I hadn't thought about that I didn't do, so it wasn't a problem for me, putting personal information in, it's a violation of privacy.
Definitely.
And I had never thought about that. My comments were, she's been on this committee, that committee, but it was too general. It couldn't be identified to anybody. But writing a letter of recommendation for the JALT speaker, she needed a letter for her school to get payment. I just put the topic and letter of recommendation into ChatGPT, and I had a nice letter, and I had to throw away half of it, but I spent a couple of hours editing it to make it personal for her, and it was a great letter, and much better than anything I would have written on my own.
I think that's a valid point, Linda, and it reminds me of something that I was thinking of myself. We don't spend enough time actually telling our students that not just ChatGPT, not just Bard, but online tools in general that are free to use, that those tools are free to use because it's not that they're free. They're not free.
They're not.
You are the product.
Exactly.
The consumers of that product are the advertisers who are going to get the personal information and the ideas that you put into Bard, into ChatGPT, which then goes to Microsoft. That becomes the product that they sell to the advertisers. You're telling them stuff. So you were asking it a lot of questions about, I don't know, how do I raise tomatoes in a pot, which I did the other day. I realized I just told Google, I'm looking to raise tomatoes in a pot. And we don't tell our students that enough about Instagram, about Facebook, about Twitter, about everything that's out there.
Okay, well, you know, when I was asked to write an article about ChatGPT for the BrainSig, for their think tank issue, and just as Linda was talking and she mentioned about people doing recommendations, like my brain was going boom, 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 because without thinking, we'll give away information. And I just want to share like a little part here with the ethical issues. It was mentioned here, there's this hidden price, yeah. So this professor from the Business Information Systems in Sydney University says, well, nobody gave permission for all this information to be scraped from the internet and what happens with it after that. But we also have to think about, where was it? The ChatGPT's policy. So it states openly that conversations between users and the chatbot are harvested for training. Yeah. And I want to share what they actually said directly. Chrome, what is ChatGPT? Sorry,
That's okay. While you're looking for that, I wanted to have the audience and our guests also consider. Pop up that share when you find what you're looking for.
Yeah, I will.
The question as I was looking forward to this episode, a lot of stuff very sneakily started showing up on YouTube and Facebook about AI, because guess what? Facebook was watching me talk to the three of you about AI and machine translation. We were doing that in Messenger. So all of these ads start coming through. But I was happy about it because especially YouTube started sending me videos that were really relevant to the general AI consideration. And one was by Yuval Noah Harari. And if you don't know him, he's a famous writer, a historian who wrote Homo Deus and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. Louise, go ahead.
No, keep going. Just I'll hide it if you prefer. And we'll
we'll get to it. Just remind me to do that. Yuval Noah Harari, and basically this was a 45-minute plea on his part of an extremely intelligent, he's basically a philosopher, historian, who says we have to slow down on the implementation of AI, if only in terms of what he was afraid he would start seeing in the military's use of AI. Immediately after that, a couple of days later, I watched a couple of YouTube videos from good sources, not like conspiracy theorists or anything, about how AI has really accelerated out of the Ukraine war. And how we didn't even notice that it was being used for drone swarms in other smaller wars that are happening in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East. And and the last one was I watched a really interesting documentary on AlphaGo. And I don't know if you guys know about AlphaGo. Well, okay, some heads are nodding just very quickly. It's a Google software project to try to find a way to get machine learning to create a robot that can beat humans at Go, the most difficult, most board game ever in the world. And it did. It beat, oh God, now I forget his name, Lee Sundol, I think, and I might have missaid his name. But the best Go player in the world has now been defeated by a robot. Where this is all going is something that I think we have to think about, not just in terms of our classrooms, but on a general level. But Louise, what do you got there for us?
So yeah, they often we don't read the terms of use and the policies. You know, you get the next update, and of course, people are just impatient and at it. But you know, I looked into this kind of stuff, and this is on the main, you know, that first main page you come into with the purple background.
Yeah. The one I didn't read. Yeah.
If you scroll down and down and down, you'll eventually find the Q&A section. And so when you get here, you'll find that there's a section about who can view it. There's a section about, will they be used for training? Yes. Can you delete your data? Yes, but you've got to go through this detailed process to do it. But, you know, you can't delete specific prompts from your history. So it's telling you really directly, don't share anything that's sensitive. Yeah. And I think that people don't come this far, you know, before using the tool and think about what happens to the data. And there's also the fact that when we use this, it's very different to using Google Translate. Google Translate, we're giving away the data, but we're not necessarily giving away who we are. Whereas with ChatGPT, you have to register an email address and a phone number. Yeah. And so that's why any staff or students at institutions who use it need to do so of their own free will. I can't ask my students to use ChatGPT, not on their own account, that's for sure. Some of them have played around with it on my account, but I can't ask anyone to make this. It's very different to asking them, okay, open up Google Translate, because there's that connection to them personally that we don't have if you're using Google unsigned in.
Susan Suwako?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that the translation, the machine translation apps, Google Translate, DeepL, et cetera, they are also using your data in the same way for training purposes to improve the translation. And that's why a lot of translation clients will actually forbid certain translation projects or certain translation, things that they're doing, forbid us from using any machine translation because it's a patent. They don't want their data to get out. They don't want their patent to be breached, their patent application to be breached, or very sensitive, confidential information. We translators have to sign a contract that says, if you've told me not to use machine translation, I promise I'm not going to. Some of them go even further and say, you're not allowed to be connected to the internet in any way while you work on our translation. Those are the
dictionary then.
yeah, exactly. A paper dictionary. There are still clients who request that because they are using that information. It's very important to understand that. ChatGPT, OpenAI, they do have an indemnification clause. If you go even further into their policies and usage regulations, you cannot hold them responsible if you use their. Right, you can't blame them. If you're one of the lawyers in the States a couple of weeks ago who gave an incorrect citation or several incorrect citations that didn't exist, they were hallucinations. You can't sue ChatGPT for that. You can't sue OpenAI for that. So
but that comes back to responsibility, because there's a case going through in Australia, a guy who was implicated in a crime, and he wasn't actually, one of the perpetrators. He was peripheral to this, and his name got put through as if he was one of the criminals. And so where does responsibility lie?
So Linda, just 1 second. Suwako, did you want to?
So related to policies in our university, one of the first clause, it's actually shared on the internet, is just make sure that you're not sharing any information that you shouldn't be sharing. So that's, that was one of the first advice that they give to the students as part of their policy.
I was going to say the same thing. I get things like this all the time and I can't read them, and I would use the Google Translate to translate it for me. But it's got account numbers and passwords and all sorts of things that should not be shared. And I was not thinking of, last year I wasn't thinking about anything. I have to translate. I have to know what this is. And I've finally become aware that I need to cover up the passwords or the personal information. Before using translation software to figure out what all these documents are.
Such a good reminder. Thank you.
Definitely.
For everything that comes in the mail regarding my husband, he's gone now and most everything's settled, so it probably won't matter, I hope.
I think you still keep blocking them out, though. For what it's worth, and what I'm about to say, I'm sure will put a smile on Adam Jenkins's face. But for what it's worth, I know that if I put something into Google, like even where I'm going to be going this afternoon, I ask it for directions. It knows that about me now. So for those of you who are still using stuff like that, remember, you're the product. Now, for what it's worth, Apple, now I know that Adam is smiling right now. Apple says that we don't do what Google does. Once you ask us for that information, your map destinations are immediately separated from your name. What you ask Siri stays entirely private to you. I still wouldn't tell Apple, and I wouldn't take a picture to translate. By the way, all of that translation stuff that you asked Google to do, Linda, for what it's worth, at least Apple says that we don't do what Google does. And their translation software, their phone translation camera function is just as good. But I still wouldn't let them in on my passwords. Yeah, your addresses, stuff like that, be careful. Right. Does anyone else in the audience want to ask a question? Unless Linda, you have your hand up, you want to ask?
Oh, no, I just
okay, so I'll get that.
Put it down.
Yeah. Okay. Any sort of like closing remarks, ladies? I mean, I went on a bit of a rant there about the military and about how AI is going to eat us all in the next 3 or 4 days. But I thought it was really interesting that I thought when Susan did her first presentation on machine translation, that wonderful presentation she did at Summer Sessions 21, I thought, wow, that's amazing. You know, machine translation, we really have to chow down on this. And not 6 months later, you know, ChatGPT shows up, Bard shows up, Bing shows up. And then I'm reading all these things about how the makers of ChatGPT put up their own warning video about generative AI. They pointed to a couple of examples of other AI that they just sort of let loose on its own, like how Google let AlphaGo learn, not just AlphaGo, but other software to learn how to play Pong, learn how to play Go, learn how to play StarCraft. Now they have this multimodal software being challenged by AlphaStar and AlphaStar 1. When you've got things like that happening, there was this other software that's being pointed out to by the makers of OpenAI, said that when we let the software go, it actually learned on its own without instruction. It learned how to speak Farsi. So somehow it went on the internet, found out that there's this language called Farsi, learned the language Farsi, and started generating text in Farsi, which they present to an Iranian person and said, does this make any sense? Yeah, it makes perfectly good sense.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. And then the other Jack, that the Joker that we're not considering is computing power, how computing power is going to jump. We're talking about, you know,
you made me think of the Matrix. You made me think of the Matrix, you know, with you know, wow, I know Chinese, I know Kung Fu.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, and then Elon Musk is I think he already did put a chip in his head, you know. But as I talk about the gloom and doom, do you think it's gloom and doom, ladies, or do you think it's a brave new world, or do you think it's brave new quotation marks brave new world, the book, not the philosophical ideal? I get silence.
Society.
It's a brave new world that's scary.
I think it's an upheaval, a period of upheaval. There's going to be a lot of pain, and there's going to, definitely in different industries. There are going to be tough times ahead because I just read on Twitter yesterday that this entrepreneur over in India fired 90% of his workforce because he can handle the customer service through AI now.
And he's going to regret that.
Oh, he's been put in, you know, loads and loads of news articles since then. And
regardless of the news,
people have then started checking his platform and complaining about the customer service and posting about it. But, you know, there are going to be companies that do this. And like the example we had of actors, for writers, there's going to be many sections of society that feel the pain, that have a big change. And teaching won't be something that's saved. Teaching is going to be affected too, for sure. It's Absolutely. Going to changes in the workforce. There will be benefits and there will be really, really difficult obstacles to overcome.
Suwako, your point of view?
Yeah, it's definitely challenging times. I think it's you know, we have these tools. We need to embrace it. I feel that I will embrace it. I am embracing it. I'm sure there's going to be mixed opinions about that, but the tools are here to stay. The cat's out of the bag. One of my students wrote, it's like washing clothes in the river if we were to be banned from using these tools. So I'm going to embrace it. I hope other teachers will embrace it and find ways to work with the students with the departments, with the university to make it, to make positive changes in the classroom, that helps and promotes learning for the students. And yeah, so I think that's the way I'm going to take these tours. Yeah.
Susan.
Yeah. I think it's a pivotal moment for sure. But it's also an incredible chance for us. ChatGPT still hallucinates regularly. Machine translation does not have 100% accuracy rate at all, not even close. This is our chance to wrap our minds around what this technology is, what it will be capable of. It's not yet, but we've been given a glimpse in the past 8 months about what's on the horizon, and we need to be ready for it. We need to have our thinking around it in order. We have to have our policies in place. We have to, within ourselves, not just as institutions. Of course, as an institution, we need institutional policies as well. But I think it's a very individual thing. We need to come to terms with how are we going to use this going forward? Because it's already here. It's already a part of our lives in so many ways. It's not perfect yet. So this is our chance. This is our moment to wrap our minds around it and figure out how we're going to use it. So I hope that people here today hopefully got some ideas
I'm sure
about how to. Yeah, I hope it was useful. And I'd also like to jump in with Adam's comment that I think we need to acknowledge that this is the very last episode of OTJtv that you have valiantly hosted for 55 episodes. Jose, amazing. Thank you so much.
Was it 53? 53?
55. There are
53,
actually three separate typos. One thing said 53, one said 54. It's actually 55.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's a good number.
Jose, I mean, what a great service to our field, honestly. You were one of the people who really brought the community together during the pandemic. Not only through OTJ and Facebook, but also through the summer sessions, getting people together for those, along with Adam. You were setting up Friday night socials. It started out as a lot of tech support, but it also acted as a way to bring people together in a very isolating period when people were struggling, not only with adapting to new teaching practices, because many people were online, but also, the isolation that people were feeling to be at home all of the time. And you really did something amazing for the teaching community here in Japan and reached beyond Japan too. So hats off to you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you
so much.
You're more than welcome, Linda, and Louise and everyone else. I would like to replace that pronoun from you to we. We used my Zoom rooms and we had some ideas, Adam and I, to put people together. But the real achievement that helped teachers through what we had to go through in the last 3 years was something that we put together. So I don't want to take any more credit besides the fact that we used my Zoom account a lot of the time.
That might be true, but without a catalyst, it wouldn't have happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And the Friday night socials are still going strong. So come back and join us sometime.
I believe I will. I believe I should start coming in there.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I was about to hold up, but I realized I put my book away. I'm going to be writing a new book soon. So when it's time for me to actually start selling books.
Plug your old one. Plug your old one.
Yeah,
I got a book out. Look under. You keep that at your desk?
I used to have it at my desk, but I've moved it to my bookshelf.
Oh yeah, not only this, but also this came.
There you go. Now that is worth a mention.
So last, couple of weeks ago, Diane was on the show, right? So
yes, she was.
Got this one, and also, this one.
Oh, Lou's book.
And
Lou's books.
I don't know that second one you held up, but that last one. What is the last one?
This one here.
Death on
Death on Guacamole Island.
Who wrote that?
Oh, that was good.
This is translated by the other
Louise's.
Yeah. Not me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
they're
other
not Louise Orhashi, but Louise Hill Kauai. Yeah. And
Louise,
she
I
won
haven't seen you.
lots
I
of
hope you're doing well.
Awards for these things too.
So you see, everyone actually has their own achievements, and it's amazing. Diane is like #1 overall, and not just like in the very tiny category that this book was #1 in, but in like American foreign literature.
Yes.
#1.
Yes.
Now that's something.
That was amazing. And everyone who's read it so far says it's great. So as soon as I get done reading student papers, I'm looking forward to reading it.
Okay, we had some nice comments in the Facebook chat, and one from Nick Son kind of puts it together. Thanks all, very interesting. Embrace the good, reject the bad, and challenge the disparities. Jose, you are 55.
Yeah, I like that. Exactly, I like that.
You are 55.
Nice.
No, unfortunately, I am not 55. But thank you very much for the congratulations. Anyone else with a final comment? No. And then I want to say for myself, thank you very much for coming to whatever episodes that you've been able to join us with OTJtv. Thank you for being members of OTJ and helping the community. It was my privilege and my honor to be able to do this. And as we all move on, let's all just keep working together, collaborating together. I'm going to probably see a bunch of you, I hope, tonight at 6:30. I'll drop in at least a little bit for our Louise's gig. And I'm always here. If you have a problem with your Apple computer, or if you still don't think that it's actually going to protect your privacy, come at me, bro. We'll have a chat. Thanks very much, everyone. It's been fun.
I hope if something comes up and there's a need or a want for some future OTJ TV, I hope this isn't closed forever.
Maybe some special events.
Every once in a while, if there's something that comes up and you have want to share, please do.
And that goes out to everyone. But as long as nobody minds, I might actually do that.
There might be an encore then, Jose.
I could be, who knows? Or maybe, I don't know, Susan, Adam, Mary. I'll give you all the materials. I'll give you all the editing templates, and you can do OTJ TV. But otherwise,
Fair amount of work.
Thank you all, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.